right. I actually didn't have time to plant any questions. So, do we have any questions? Yeah, sir.
Yeah, you mentioned shot rock. I do not know the definition of shot rock. I'm assuming it's a size definition.
So the question, if you didn't hear it, is what is the definition of shot rock? Mr. Reedy?
Yeah, I actually had to prepare a formal definition for a bunch of agencies not too long ago, so I'll take this one. It is material that is not of native origin in the river ecosystem. It got there as a result of blasting, as was necessary, much blasting of bedrock material to, first of all, create the Yuba Dam and the footings for the dam, and then also for some of the hydroelectric facilities, the tunnels and whatnot. And so we have a lot of it in the river channel below the Yuba Dam. We don't have natural spawning gravel, but we have a lot of this material that is in the way of restoring the river.
Anybody else? Rory?
So not knowing the global picture of this or even the domestic picture of this, but understanding there is a Clean Water Act that has national impact, how can Circle grab some of that money to pursue the ideas and ideals that we have?
So the question is, how can we get funding under the Clean Water Act, or, all right, who wants to take that? Rachel?
Well, Rory, we try every day. I think that now that we have, I know what you're asking about, which is specifically mines. Rory lives on Scotchman Creek and has been the biggest advocates for trying to clean up some of those mines in that watershed. Now that we have data that shows that indeed there is too much mercury in some of these creeks, we can use that as justification for trying to get funding for some of these projects. Working with agencies like state parks or the Forest Service is easier than private landowners because it's hard to get money to spend on private land sometimes. So.
Lauren?
Yeah, this is so beautiful. So I'm really glad to see that in the bottom part of the lower shed there was some shelter being provided for the fry. And I'm wondering if in the upper part of the lower watershed, do you accommodate for temperature variations by channelizing and deepening? Are there places along the way where they'll have refuge as well?
So the question was about whether or not we're creating channel features to create temperature refugia in the lower part of the river for baby salmon, for salmon fry. And the answer is yes. I think Alex, do you have my answer here?
Yes.
Okay. A lot of those projects, the project at Longbar, the project at Fallwood, we're working on reconnecting high flow channels so that they're deeper and can have colder water through them through the summer months, so that baby salmon fry can stay there and be comfortable there. Yeah, maybe Gary on that.
Well, I wanted to talk about river flows for a moment, because one thing we don't have set up here, but some of you are interested in is the flow below. You mentioned above. Maybe you're thinking of the South Yuba River. I'm not sure. But I wanted to make sure people were aware that a lot of our work in the FERC licensing process has contributed to securing enhanced flows below Spalding Dam, below the dam on Canyon Creek, below dams on the Middle Yuba River. So that will provide cooler water for those cold water dependent species. And we're still some years away from that regulatory process completing, so those new licenses will go into effect. But we're hoping that PG&E and NID may implement some of those measures and provide that necessary cold water refuge habitat sooner. But we can celebrate that that's coming. That's part of our restoration work that we're here to celebrate.
All right, Jeff.
Thank you for this presentation. I was glad to see Dan Miller here tonight. I told him that he would probably learn something. He's gone now. Anyway, my question is the efforts to rebuild the Bridgeport Bridge need some more funding, I guess, and I think I heard where Hank Weston was involved, but explain where that's at and Circle's involvement in that.
Thank you. Yeah, the question is about the Bridgeport Covered Bridge and the status of the restoration of that project. Thank you for that. You know, the bridge is such an apt metaphor for this work. I don't think any of us thought when we learned in May 2011 and when Governor Brown was going to close a third of California's state parks, and this community rallied to protect Malakoff and South Yuba River, which were on the closure list. At that same time, the state parks closed the Bridgeport Covered Bridge, which was built in 1862, and many of us have walked across it. It's been part of our history in our lives, and they just put up a chain link fence. And when we asked what was going to happen, they said, this is it. It's not safe for pedestrians. And we were like, well, what are you going to do? And they had no money and no plan. And of course, they were about to close 70 state parks. So our effort to save the parks was successful in compelling the governor. It also gave us a crash course in how projects are financed. And I would like to really give credit to the Nevada County Board of Supervisors and their legislative staff who worked with us, Circle, the South Yuba River Park Association, all of the chambers of commerce, all of the cities, all of the counties. What a united effort came together to show up at the subcommittee level at the Assembly and Senate, day after day, going to Sacramento, writing letters, and actually really annoying the Department of Finance and state staff who were like, don't tell us how to do our job. And we were able to get the money that they said was necessary to first, phase one, stabilize and then restore. And the budget at that point was $1.3 million. And last January, we met with state park staff because we've never stopped meeting. Even after getting the $1.3 million, we've been meeting every month because we have been monitoring the project. So the first phase was to stabilize the bridge from being washed away. So you've probably gone down and seen these huge steel girders strapped to the bridge on both sides. So that's the first phase. The second is to, because it's a state and national landmark, to restore it by all the guidelines. And that's part of the cost increase. And the state parks have also learned the hard way to put in huge contingencies. And so we are now at $3.9 million for the project. And that's crazy. No, don't clap. That's bad news. So the project has tripled. The project has tripled. And so we went down to the state and said, you know, our group, which is an amazing group of people, and led by Hank Weston, and you need to complete this project. And they said, yeah, we'll complete it. And we've got it in our 3, 5, 15-year budget, you know, it's stabilized. And we're like, no, you need to finish it like now, 2017. And they were like, well, 2019. So the long and the short of it is that California just got a windfall of money. And so we were advised, our state assembly member, Brian Dolly, had a town hall meeting in January and brought up Assembly Members Levine and Assembly Member Gordon. And we all told them it was about parks, and we said, this is important to us. And they said, ask for all the money now. And so that's why Supervisor Weston and I were in the Capitol last week. That's why we're going to go again later this month, and later this month, and later this month, and all of these subcommittee meetings, because we want their commitment beyond the oral saying, yeah, we'll finish the project. We want the $2.6 million balance secured and held, and for the project to keep moving forward in an expedited way.
It came as new information that 50% of the Yuba water is diverted to the Bear River. And being new, I have known who makes that decision to divert the natural water flow somewhere else, and why are they diverting that water?
Yeah, there's this little book that I think some folks have read about water diversions in the West. The question is about who made the decision to divert so much water from the Yuba to the Bear. And I think that, Gary, you want to take that?
Yeah. I'll try to give a short answer. It's a long history. Many of you may not be aware, I'm sure some of you are, that Spalding Dam, when it was built back in the 1860s and then raised in the 1890s around the turn of the century, was one of the largest dams in the West at that time, and then it's been raised subsequently since. Bowman Dam on Canyon Creek, not far away from there, is also one of the oldest, largest dams in our western United States. The infrastructure for these dams and these diversions goes back a long, long way, and more recently was turned into hydroelectric power and diversions to the Bear River and so forth. And that's the watershed we live in, and it's quite miraculous that it's also one of our few California state wild and scenic rivers. So this is the landscape we live in. We have mercury pollution. We have so many dams and diversions in the upper watershed, and it's actually more like 2/3 of the total annual flow of the Middle Yuba River and the South Yuba River is diverted primarily the Drum Spalding Canal that you see driving down Highway 20 before you get to that big river. Yeah, that's Yuba Rock water flowing to the Bear River, and a portion of that water is part of what has been secured as returning to the Middle Yuba River, Canyon Creek, and the South Yuba River. And that amount of water is to be used back in the river at just the right time in the spring and when it's too hot in the summer for trout trying to survive in the upper South Yuba River and so on. So, we have environmental laws coming into the whole dam licensing and diversion operations to help restore what the river really needs, but we're just a small portion is all we're getting back, and those diversions are something that are going to be part of the Yuba River and why it's connected to the Bear River. These rivers are forever connected, and that's why we're talking about the Bear River so much.
Why is it diverted?
Water supply. There's a lot of hydropower facilities down the Bear River, but ultimately that water all goes to uses by that irrigation district, Placer County Water Agency, and others downstream.
Can I just ask a follow-up clarification?
Sure, let me just say one thing real quick, is that the terms of these licenses about how much flow gets released and where it goes, that's negotiated every 50 years. And so the last time this was negotiated in our community was in the early 60s. And that's pre all of the environmental legislation and consciousness of the 70s. And so there is an incredible coalition, many of the people in this room, water agencies, hydropower conservationists, who have been working for almost a decade and representing Circle at these meetings in Sacramento many times a week for 7 to 10 years now. Gary's been our man at the table, so I'd just like to thank him publicly for his dedication to his hard work. I went to one meeting, and that was all I could do. So, Robin.
It's just a real quick pleasure. I was under the assumption that the water from the Yuba, from the Bear, could also be diverted back to the Yuba. Is that correct, or is it just one way?
No, it can't.
You want to repeat the question?
Yeah, the water from the Yuba to the Bear doesn't.
Just the one.
Well, with the exception, you might be thinking of the South Yuba Canal returns water to Deer Creek. Yeah, there's a relatively small portion that ends up contributing to the flows that we see through Nevada City and Deer Creek. That's Yuba water diverted.
Coming from where?
A lesser portion. Spalding Dam, which collects water from the Middle Yuba River, from Canyon Creek, and from the Upper South Yuba River. There's two major diversions from that location, the smaller of which comes back through Deer Creek.
All right, Otis.
It's actually even slightly crazier than that. Because half of the water that goes to the Bear River then goes across the ridge and goes into the American River and ends up at a power plant at Rattlesnake Bar on Folsom Reservoir. So it's incredibly complex from the middle fork of the Yuba to the South Yuba to the Bear to the North Fork of the American. There's even the North Fork of the American diversion up above into the South Yuba back to the Bear
And to start getting interested, talk to Otis after the break over here. Otis is a 4 or 5-time member of the Placer County,
Yeah, 5 terms, 21 years.
21 years as an elected representative on these issues, and is currently the president of a conservation organization deeply involved in this issue. Who do you see? Who's next? Sir.
Just curious about the recent decision on the Klamath River, and is that going to have any influence indirectly or directly with things that are happening here on the Yuba?
Question is whether what took place recently on the Klamath, big news, whether there'll be any impact locally. Have any thoughts on that?
I have a lot of, yeah, we think we both have a lot of thoughts on that. I think besides getting people really interested in dam removals maybe, but also seeing the complexities there and how long it takes, it reminds me that it's a really long process. So,
Like
decades.
The history on the Klamath River, just going back from December, when the restoration agreement was killed in Washington due to some short-sighted and ideological politics, to a couple of weeks ago when there's a new agreement, is a testament to the power of people who love a river to persevere until they get the kind of plan and the kind of solution that works for the people in that watershed. And that is certainly something that we can look to as hopefully influential to our future here and encouragement.
With the changing weather patterns, we're noticing that storms come in short, fast, and wet. So we get very peaky systems, lots of flow over a short, compressed period of time, which makes me think about how to ameliorate that in terms of forestry, land use planning, and estuarine restoration. I'm wondering what Circle's opinion of the state of the research out there, what literature search has shown you on alternative ways of managing forests, alternative ways of managing human land use impacts, alternative ways of handling dikes, reestablishing estuaries. I know there's a very small project, I think it's on the Stanislaw, maybe? Might be the wrong river. But what's your thoughts on what the state of science is on understanding how to slow down these peak flows?
So the question is very multifaceted, but the crux of it is how can we slow down these peaking flows now that more of our precipitation is being delivered as rain instead of snow? Is that sum it up?
Precisely.
Okay, and what is the state of the science behind all that? I think that you asked maybe like 3 or 4 different questions, and each one of those different, timber management, dikes.
Clever, huh?
Yeah, it's so clever. Each one of those is at a different place in time as far as the scientific understanding of what the benefits are.
However, you can see the string that ties them all together.
Right, it's like some people say it's like a pearl necklace. You try to connect all the dots. How we manage water in the future, how we manage our forests in the future. Do we cut them down to take out the straws in the system? Do we restore our meadows to keep the water higher in the watershed for longer?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, we do. That's right. Yeah, we do. I didn't talk about that tonight. That's my other love. I think the state of science is they're looking into it. People are starting to do really cool experiments. There's a bunch of forest experimental plots that are, hundreds of acres big, and they're cutting down trees and leaving trees and trying to figure out whether or not we can store more snow, store more water now versus 10 years from now, and those have been in place for a long time. So people are looking into it, and Circle is also looking into it. We've been going to a lot of meetings about that lately. That's the best answer I can give you.
I'll call you.
Yeah, call me.
All right, let's take maybe one last question and then have some beer. Sir.
An invasive snail has been discovered in the lower Yuba and is expected to take half of the food away from the organisms within the river.
Yeah.
Should be monitored.
So the question is that there's this invasive snail that has been found in the lower Yuba River, and this is actually very devastating because what it does, and your question was specifically, it's going to eat some of the food that fish normally eat. So it's going to take up some of that food, the juvenile salmon, would normally be munching on as they're growing and getting big and fat so they can make it out to the ocean and then make it back to spawn again. It's a huge concern, and we're working with the Gold Country fly fishers. We did a press release, I think, a couple of months ago when they first found it. And we should start monitoring it and figuring out how to eradicate it, though I don't think that eradication has been very successful in other river systems. But it's sad. So clean your waders.
I heard that that snail is from New Zealand,
It's a New Zealand mud snail.
and I also heard that in New Zealand, it's been checked with by the eels.
Right, it has a native predator, so when an invasive species is sometimes invasive because it doesn't have a natural predator. Here in California, it doesn't have a natural predator.
So let's get some eels.
Right, and that's a good, and I'm sure there are labs out there studying what kind of species we can introduce to combat that. But the science isn't there yet to introduce a new species because we don't know what the unintended impacts of introducing another species on top of that would be. So, but I would be supportive of that as a science course.
Next menu item.
Just wanted to put this in perspective. The invasion of New Zealand mud snails to the lower Yuba River and to other rivers of California is just one more incremental threat to our native species like salmon, and it alone wouldn't devastate salmon. But in addition to the other threats and limitations for healthy habitat to support salmon, it just makes our work all the more important. If it were 50% of the nutrient supply that provides food for our juvenile salmon that need to grow to a certain size to get out to the ocean and come back, then it just makes it all the more important that we increase the abundance of our wild salmon in the lower Yuba River so their marine-derived nutrients can be that source for a healthy river. It may be devastating in certain respects, with change to the trophic scale, but it alone is not devastating to our ambitions to restore the river or our opportunities to save the species from extinction.
In that regard, what is our or your position regarding the introduction of the mosquito fish that's about to take place?
In the Yuba?
In here, they're giving mosquito fish away, which is obviously not a native, and it's supposed to only go into ponds and enclosed certain places, but I think, you're not familiar with it, or if you are, or is there any notion, or any thought that we might intervene?
Yeah. I think mosquito fish are another invasive species that humans are responsible for, and we need to act responsibly regarding the management. Free giveaway of mosquito fish, go down to the county and put them in your ponds. And I'm thinking about getting some in my pond, but I need to be very careful about how they would affect downstream aquatic habitat, so I haven't done it. And I hope everybody will think very carefully about their contribution to the spread of invasive species. And it's like Rachel said, we need to think like a watershed in every action that we take. And irresponsibly or without much consciousness, spreading an invasive species is definitely a real priority. Thank you for bringing that up.
I'm not worried about you, I'm worried about the other people that might be getting fish.
It's definitely a concern in the context of a watershed. I mean, as a river organization, as a river fisheries biologist, I'm not worried about mosquito fish because they won't persist in the river. I'm more worried about others, but I think as a watershed, we need to be concerned about all invasive exotic species.
All right, I want to thank Rachel and Gary for joining the panel tonight. I'd like to thank, again, all of you for coming out tonight, all of our special guests, elected officials, representatives of our partner agencies and conservation groups. And please we're going to be here for another 30, 40 minutes. Let me just point out again around the room, if you haven't signed the Fish Don't Drive petition, start over there. If you haven't become a dues-paying Circle member, go over here. If you haven't bought any Circle swag, t-shirts, hats, etc., next stop. If you want to learn about the Wild and Scenic Film Festival, if you want to volunteer, be a river monitor, meet the Sierra Fund staff, meet the Foothill Water Network team, learn from staff on various scientific projects, drink beer with the Wild and Scenic Film Festival on the back, and thank you all for coming. We'll be happy to answer more questions. And one last word from our esteemed board president, Mr. Joe Bell.
Well, it's more than one word, but I just want to say, back in 1983, when I was filing documents with FERC, there was no scientist in the office with me. There were a few governmental scientists who gave some comments, but I hope you appreciate tonight the degree of sophistication and scientific knowledge that this organization has at its disposal. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to have an organization that thinks before it talks. Thank you for being here and joining us all.